in our 2018 webinar group. Today we're going to be talking about something is not enough, preventing violence from entering your doors in your business or your organization. And if you'll forward the slide for me, that would be terrific, Harry. Thanks so much. We'd like you to...
You're assuming I have that technology.
Harry Rulin is joining us today, folks. And Harry, if you want to, you can even use the forward and the backward keys on your keyboard.
I tried that. It didn't want to do it, but I got it.
There's always a little delay as well. So, folks, we'd like you to connect with us on social media. We'd also like you to opt into our newsletter. We had a great newsletter out today. You can find that on our website under opt-in. And you can connect with us on Twitter, on Facebook, on our YouTube channel, on LinkedIn, and on Instagram. If you'd like to talk to us on social media, you can use the hashtag #CrisisCoach, and we'll see it. And if you have a question today during the session for Harry, you can use the GoToWebinar console dashboard on your right. There's a little message window there, and you'll be able to see that. I was going to read our disclaimer to you, but I cannot read it.
Sure you can. I just put it
back. There it is.
I apologize. I apologize to everybody. I told Karen before we got on this call I was having trouble with my laptop, and it's giving me fits this morning, so I apologize.
And Harry, if there's any issue, if it gets stuck or anything, I do have the deck ready if you'd need it.
No. I'm good now.
Harry is an attorney, and he can tell you that this webinar is not complete without the accompanying oral comments and discussion. Any work product provided by Firestorm should be read in conjunction with guidance given by national, regional, and local authorities, as well as your organization's personal counsel. This is not information to be interpreted as legal advice or legal opinion. You can go ahead and move forward, Harry. I appreciate it. And let's talk a little bit about Firestorm very quickly. You know us. Firestorm transforms crisis into value. We are a Novum company, and we assist clients transform crisis into value and have responded to some of the more high-profile and some of the largest situations and crisis events in the country. We do empower you to manage risk and crisis and risk through assessments, audits, program development, training, and advisory services with our Predict, Plan, Perform methodology. Harry Rulin is the president of Novum, our parent company, and is a co-founder and former CEO of Firestorm. And Harry recently began working on a concept for something that we are now calling Share the Formula, and that's a bit what we're going to talk about today. And Harry, if you'll go to the next slide, in May of this year, we convened a group, a very prestigious group, at the National Press Club in our nation's capital. And prior to that, Harry has been working for many years, and he'll tell you himself as he begins the session, had been working on what are the components that go into preventing school violence. We know that there is no one specific answer, and there are many people who want to look at situations of school violence or business violence or workplace violence and to make it about one issue or make it a political conversation. And Harry said what we really need to do is give people the formula for all the bits and parts and pieces that must be in a full program. And he came up with the components that go into the formula. We presented this at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. We had the Albert family there. They were directly affected by a school shooting, which is also a workplace. Dr. Jeff Jackson, who's president of the Georgia Independent School Association. Susie Laughlin, one of our co-founders and co-architect of the Behavioral Risk Threat Assessment Program that we use. Brenda Truelove, who is a great partner of Firestorm. You've probably heard her on many of our sessions. And she is the program manager at the College of Continuing Studies for the University of Alabama. Many of you may be alumni of that school. And We had Mina Lux there, who talked to us about AI and predictive intelligence, Hart Brown, our CEO, and the panel was moderated by former ABC News White House correspondent Ann Compton. We had great material from that, a great discussion, and this webinar is going to speak to the concepts about that. We've had great success with people in a grassroots way sharing the message in both schools and businesses. And when you registered for this session today, we asked you some questions. And Harry, if you'd like to move forward, everyone, I give you Harry Rulin, and we're going to discuss today how you can help prevent workplace violence in your organization.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. And, you know, that was a great introduction. And this is a labor of love for me, and something that started over 11 years ago. Many of you probably know that I was the person who received the call from Dr. Charles Steger when the shootings took place at Virginia Tech. And ever since then, we've been monitoring not only school violence, but workplace violence, and trying to understand, you know, people always ask us, how do we stop the madness? How do we stop these things from occurring? And, you know, the school shootings get a lot of focus because, of course, the greatest fear of all of us as parents is that our child is somehow involved in either a school shooting or some type of violent event like that. And one of the things we started realizing was there's a hidden cost to all of that, which is that when those kids graduate from school, they go either into our higher education, our universities like Virginia Tech, or they go into our workforce. So the problems that they had don't just go away. And there is 1 to 2 workplace deaths a day in the United States from violence. So there are shootings literally every day. Somewhere in the neighborhood of 600 people die a year in the workplace from workplace violence. And so that, you know, that's on average probably about 2 people a day. And those problems, most of them can be solved or eliminated through proper techniques that we're going to talk about today, which is really what the formula is designed for. So while we first rolled the formula out to the schools, the formula applies equally well in the corporate environment. So I know on today's call, we've got both schools and corporations. So don't hesitate to ask questions, you know, from either side. I'm happy to, you know, talk to you guys about all that stuff. Before we get started, you know, if you look what's on your screen right now, we asked some questions that everybody answered. And it was interesting, you know, when we asked if your organization has prevented an act of violence from occurring in the last 365 days, I have to tell you, I was very surprised by the results. The fact that 19% of organizations said yes, I want to know what that means. We're going to follow up with you because I want to know what type of events did you stop and how, because that was a much higher number than I expected to see. I expected people to say they didn't know or no, they hadn't had anything occur, because one of the biggest issues we find in dealing with violence is that there's what we call disaster denial. People want to say it's never going to happen here. It's always going to be you know, it's something we see on television. It's not something that we need to deal with. And therefore, they don't do the planning, the training, the education, the pieces you're going to hear about today. So I really do want to follow up more and find out why is it that such a high percentage of you have seen violence in your organization. Interestingly also, that a very high percentage, 41%, felt that their organization had in place a system that identifies behaviors of concern. And similarly, 41% said that their organizations had updated their violence prevention program, which that's truly music to my ears, because most organizations that we've dealt with or where we go in and do an assessment for them, they really don't have a program to identify behaviors of concern or to deal with violent issues. So this group that's on our webinar today is really quite an informed group, and I really want to learn more from all of you. So you'll definitely be hearing from us. So one of the issues that I talk about when I speak around the country on this issue, you know, when I'm trying to explain to people why are we here, what are we talking about, is the issue of the people who are sitting on the fence. I try to get it across to school administrators, to HR professionals, to boards, to C-suites, that every single organization in this country, every one of you on this call today, there is someone in your organization that is sitting on the fence. And let me tell you what I mean by that. There is someone in your organization that has drug or alcohol problems, spousal problems, financial problems. They're being bullied. There's some issue in their background that makes them susceptible to something occurring where they then come off of the fence. Now, in a lot of those situations, they never will. They'll sit there for the rest of their life and they will never cause a problem. But very often what we see, especially in these copycat situations, when there's been a major shooting like we had, recently at Parkland, and all the media coverage that it garnered thereafter, it spawned dozens and dozens of copycat events because those people became agitated, they got pushed off the fence, and they perpetrated crimes within their corporations or their schools. And anyone who's not looking out at their organization and saying, okay, how do I help these people? How do I prevent them from ever feeling the need to act out or to bring a gun to work or to school? If you're not asking that question, you're making a mistake, because it is going to happen somewhere today, and it's as likely to be in your organization as it is in any other. So the question becomes, what do we do about it? And that's where Firestorm realized we had developed the formula and we were using it in a proprietary way to sell services to all of you and to the world as a whole. And we felt that we had an obligation because we had developed this over, as I said, over a decade. And we almost universally, when we ask people about, okay, what is it that you're doing? Are you doing all of these things? The answer was always, we have something. And hence the name for this webinar today. Something is not enough. You have to have all the pieces, because if you don't have all of the pieces, you have what I term as holes in the net, and people are going to fall through. So the next question I always get asked is, okay, where do we start? And that's where it comes down to education. We need to do awareness training. We need our employees, our students, our staff, whatever type of organization you're running, to be aware. You've all seen lately the big push that Homeland Security's been doing with if you see something, say something. Well, that's great, but you need to know what you're looking for, because behaviors of concern, where you're going to be able to help someone long before they feel the need to bring a gun to work or a gun to school, they're very subtle. Now, sometimes, Johnny has an excited utterance where he says, I'm going to kill that guy, and okay, I got to do something about this. But very often it's not that way. Very often the behaviors of concern that you're looking for are changes in behavior. That's what you're looking for. So the guy who's always been aggressive and out there and very loud, that's not what you're worried about. Yeah, you got to talk to him and you've got to deal with him, from whatever your human resource perspective is. But it's when he stops doing it, when all of a sudden he starts sitting in the corner. He used to be outgoing and gregarious, and now he's not talking to anyone and he's simmering. That change is something you need to take notice of. So first, training people on what it is they're looking for and what it is we want them to report is very important, because otherwise they won't report. The next thing we realized was, if you don't have a system by which they can report it anonymously, the likelihood is they won't report it, because people don't want to be involved. And when Mary comes to work with a black eye and she tells her coworkers, oh yeah, I got in a fight with my husband last night, most people are going to want to stay out of that. They're not going to want to report it. They're not going to want to be involved. And the problem with that is that many, many workplace violence incidents are as a result of a boyfriend or a spouse coming to work to exact retribution for something that occurred outside of the workplace. In most years, the first or second leading cause of death for women in the workplace is workplace violence by a spouse or boyfriend. So that kind of thing has to be reported. It has to be reported immediately, and your people have to have a methodology for doing that. Now, there are lots of tools for that, and I'll talk about that a little further on, but there are very simple analog tools, not even digital tools. You know, some of the organizations we work with, like children's summer camps, that don't have technology, they don't have telephones, they don't have computers. The reporting, the simplest tool that they've ever put in place was a suggestion box. A box where somebody can drop a note and they can but what those boxes, of course, have to be, people have to be able to put anything in there so that nobody knows what the note is going to say, so that there's no stigma attached with dropping a piece of paper in there. Now, interestingly, if I asked you all to guess where is the most successful place to put those suggestion boxes, if you think about it for just a minute, you'll realize. And the answer to that is in the bathroom, because it's the most private place that most organizations have. So anyway, like I said, working with you on how to develop an anonymous reporting system is not difficult when we get to that point. So the next thing you see on the screen, media monitoring, we'll go again, I'll go through all of these a little bit more in detail, but monitoring social media, monitoring communication channels in general, understanding what people are saying about you, what people are saying about each other, understanding what is happening out there is especially important. And we need to talk about that, because we live in a world where technology can help us to help our people. It can help us to see problems that are developing long before they become a problem. So again, the next step is having a centralized information warehouse. All of these different things. So you have your employees who are now aware. They're reporting things anonymously. You're seeing things on social media. That information all has to go somewhere. It has to be aggregated in a way that's meaningful. And one of the problems we have is that most organizations, be they schools, be they corporations, they aggregate that information in a way that is not useful to them. What we have found is most aggregate it chronologically. So what happens is, Johnny had a problem with his manager a month ago, and that information was reported to Human Resources, but it got stored by date. And then he had a problem with a coworker, and then he had a problem with a client, but it never shows up anywhere because they're recorded by date. And unless somebody's tracking him specifically, and that goes for students as well, you know, the schools record it in a log by date instead of by individual, so that you never see the ramp that's starting to happen. So it's very important when we create that central warehouse for the information that it be organized in a way that the people who are going to use it, and we'll talk about that in a second, have a clear picture very quickly of what's going on. So of course, if you're going to have a central warehouse, you've got to have someone who's always looking at it, someone who sees the data as it comes in and knows what to do with it. So that's your administrator on duty. So very often in a school environment, you know, we work with universities, boarding schools. Those are 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. Similarly, though, interestingly, the public school environment tends to be that way too, because a lot of the reports that we get into the central warehouse come in after school hours or come in on weekends, because these kids that are ramping up don't just get bullied in school. They don't just, you know, groove on it while they're in class. It happens when they're outside of class as well. And actually a lot of the suicide and other kind of things that are prevented in off-school hours. So very important to have an administrator on duty who's receiving that information on a 24/7 basis. If you don't have the ability to do that, there are services that we can talk to you about that can do that monitoring and make sure they get a hold of someone if the type of report warrants that. And again, I think that's the next issue. You've got to know, what do I do with this information? You need a risk categorization or a risk escalation matrix that says, if a certain type of report comes in, I'm just going to put it into the warehouse, and that will get reviewed on a regular basis by my behavioral assessment team. However, if some things come in that are immediate 911 calls where you get and we've dealt with this numerous times, and Karen can actually speak to this because her people are the ones who are monitoring media and social media on behalf of our clients, but we actually had a school where a picture got posted of a young man in a classroom with a gun. And they were not one of our clients, but we did get a hold of the school. We identified which school it was, and they were able to go into that classroom and intervene. And in fact, the kid did have a real handgun in the classroom. So knowing that that's the kind of thing that doesn't just get put into the warehouse, that's an immediate response type of situation, someone's got to have that matrix, because that administrator on duty shouldn't have to think in an emergency situation, what should I do? There shouldn't be a lot of discretion in some of those situations. And unfortunately, we've been involved in shooting situations where discretion was exercised in a way that had a bad outcome. So and we could talk to you guys about all that kind of stuff if you want to get on the phone and understand some of the situations that we've seen and been involved in. We're always happy to do that. So in any event, having a risk escalation matrix is something that's extremely important to the process. Assuming that it's not a 911 call, most things get put into the warehouse to be analyzed by a team that is a multidisciplinary team that meets on a regular basis to discuss all of the entries in the warehouse. Now, some of the things that get entered into the warehouse are going to be of such a nature on the escalation matrix that they go to the team members immediately, and the team members are asked to look at it and come to a conclusion immediately. Most of the things just get put in. Johnny got in a fight in class today. Johnny got thrown off of the bus because he was doing something. It's when the team gets together and says, hey, wait a minute, I've got 6 different things over the last 3 weeks with Johnny. Let's talk about him. We got to deal with that. So that next piece is, okay, that you got to have a management system. What do we do? And that's the piece that the behavioral assessment team will use. It has all the forms, the processes, the procedures. How are we going to deal with this from a human resource perspective? Do we have, an EAP, an employee assistance program that will help us get Johnny into drug or alcohol rehab, or help having the systems in place so that that team doesn't need to invent the wheel every time they have a problem. And then the last piece is knowing what you are going to do for violent response in case you weren't able to intervene early enough to prevent it from occurring. So what we've done at Firestorm is we've actually broken down all of the pieces, the planning, the training, the education, into what we've termed first look. So all of these things where we're going to prevent something from ever occurring. We're going to analyze the behavior, and we're going to take that first look and utilize that information to help everyone in the process. And then we've got last stand. There are last stand pieces, the locks, the lights, the cameras, the guards, all the different pieces that are also necessary, but are not part of the prevention process. So we can talk more about all of those kind of things as we go forward. Karen, how much time do we have this morning on this webinar?
These sessions are generally 45 minutes, but if you want to go a little bit longer, you can.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So we've got about another 20 minutes. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the pieces, and then I'd like to leave a little time at the end if anybody does have any questions. But I think that, again, the important thing to remember, and when you guys go to the sharetheformula.com website, or you're promoting Share the Formula, whether it's to your school board or to your C-suite or to your board of directors, you need to remember that you need all of the pieces. Do not allow there to be a hole in the net, because the pieces all interact and work together. So the awareness training piece, which is the first piece, is by far the most important thing that you can do. The eyes and ears of your people are the greatest tool that you've got. And if you think about it, on the news every night, they do interviews of people after some kind of event that has occurred. And someone always says, oh yeah, I saw, or I heard, or I knew. People see and know what's going on. And unfortunately, they don't know what to do with that information. Explaining to every employee, to every student, that they are responsible for each other and for the safety of one another. And therefore, it is imperative that they then report, is something that is not easy to get across. Because as you guys know, from the time we're all very small, we get taught that tattling is a bad thing. You're not supposed to tattle on anyone. And what we have to explain to people is there is a huge difference between tattling and reporting, and that it's an obligation that they have. So that awareness training piece needs to be done very carefully, and it needs to be continuously reinforced, because again, our general nature and our culture is such that that's just not what we do. So I talked a little bit about behaviors of concern and some of the problems that people may be looking for. Again, I think it's important. One of the most important things you can get across to everybody is it's changes in behavior. So again, you look on your screen now, and then there's a list of behaviors: difficulty getting along with others. Well, if Harry's always had a problem getting along with others, that's really not it's an issue. It's an issue for human resources, or or your school administrators to deal with, but it's not necessarily an issue from a predictive standpoint. But if Harry was always the kind of guy who got along with everybody, and now is having difficulty getting along with others, you really better pay attention to that. And you're going to see there are ways of analyzing this, but you have to have, again, we talked about that behavioral assessment team. Those people must be trained. They need to understand what the behaviors mean and what it is they're going to do about it, who the professionals are that they have that can help them in analyzing, and making sure they're comfortable dealing with the situation. Direct threats tend to be easy. But the problem with direct threats are knowing, what did the person mean by that? I can say, oh man, I'm going to kill you for that. And I didn't I didn't mean that. Similarly, I can make a true threat, and someone needs to be able to analyze that and understand it. Now, interestingly, some of the school systems, universities, and corporations around the country that we've worked with have made the determination that the words will be taken literally no matter what. So anytime someone threatens to cause bodily injury to another person, even if they were just joking around, it's reported as though it was what was said was actually meant. Now, you're going to have to decide that as part of your overall program. Is that what you're going to do? Because, again, depending on the type of environment that you exist in, that may or may not be appropriate, and that's part of the design of this whole plan. Again, you don't want to reinvent the wheel every time a report gets made. You want to have talked this through. How are we going to deal with this long in advance? So looking at all the behaviors that you see on your screen, this is just a short list. I mean, literally just a teeny little part of the overall puzzle. And we've got to decide, how do we make it comprehensible and manageable for the employees that we're going to be training? And that's where the whole thing becomes specific to your organization. There's no way to generalize it and say, okay, here's a package that, we just sort of plug in the whole thing and now you're safe. That's just, unfortunately, that's not how it works. I talked to you already about the anonymous reporting piece. There are lots, and I mean lots of tools out there to do this. If you're working in a business or school environment where the majority of your people have access to technology, specifically cell phones, there are lots of tools that allow you to text in reports. And interestingly, the way that those work is the text goes into a central server, which assigns it a unique identifier, which then sends it out to either your human resource department or whomever it is you've designated as to receive those reports, including the administrator on duty. But there's no way for anyone to see who sent it, and that's extremely important. So, but again, if we need to work with you to figure out, okay, what can we design that works in your environment, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're more than happy to talk to you about that. So really think about that anonymous reporting piece, because now that the eyes and ears of your people have been awakened by the training process, we now need to make sure they have a way to report it. You know, again, there's always someone who knows. If you look at the reports, whether it's from the Secret Service or any of the other studies that have been done, someone always knows that something is going on and they don't know what to do with that information. And that's something that we're looking to eliminate to the greatest degree possible. So again, think about anonymous reporting within your organization. The media monitoring piece, Karen and her folks can speak to far more in depth than I can, but what I can tell you is almost every organization we speak with, we ask them, are you monitoring all forms of media, including social media? Do you have the ability to do dark web searches? Do you have the ability to really understand what's being said by your people, and about your organization? And typically the answer we get back is, oh yeah, we do that. And then we ask them, okay, well, tell us what it is you do. Oh, well, we've got Google searches set up so that we know if anyone says anything about our company. That is not going to do what we need you all to do. And again, if you want to talk more about how you monitor media and social media, that's something that you can get a hold of Karen and her folks for, and they can walk you through that. Especially as part of your overall program, your behavioral assessment team will need to be able to access information. And this is open source information. We're not in any way suggesting that you violate people's passwords or anything like that. But there is information out there about your perpetrators, and you want to know it. You need to know it. You need to know it for a multitude of reasons. Another thing you also want to be careful about, almost every crisis we get involved in, we have to explain to people the concept of negative search engine optimization, where your firm starts, or your school starts to get associated with the search terms. So if there's been a shooting and your organizational name gets associated in the Google crawlers with that particular act, all of a sudden, when someone's searching either just for your organization or they're just searching on that particular violent act, your website comes up. You know, your information comes up as one of the hits. And that is not what you want from a brand and reputation standpoint. So one of the things that we look at when we're designing these programs and responding is, what does it mean a week, a month, a year, 5 years down the road, the actions that we're taking? And by planning and training and doing these things in advance, not only are we going to help our people and prevent these violent acts from occurring, but we're going to help our employees, our shareholders, and everybody in the short and long run. So very important that you be doing this kind of monitoring. I think I've talked enough, about the monitoring and the process of it, but having a comprehensive network to understand all of the information that's out there is going to be a really big part of making sure you can respond to the threats as they present themselves, and in most cases, long before they actually look like a threat. So you won't necessarily get the information from any one source. It could be from an employee making a report. It could be from social media. It could be from any number of places. But you want to make sure that you've got a comprehensive system that allows you to get that information and analyze that information. The central data warehouse, one of the things that we get asked all the time is, well, how do we do that? How do we set that up? Interestingly, for so long, those kind of things were kept literally on paper. And there's no reason that it couldn't even be today. I mean, depending on the size of your organization, it could be kept on paper. The problem with that, of course, is sharing that information. If you've got something as simple as an Excel spreadsheet, you can then share it with your entire behavioral assessment team. And obviously, there are far more complex methodologies for doing that then allow you to monitor and limit who can change information, who can input information, who can do different things with it. There's lots of different software that our folks can talk to you about if that's what you're interested in. But I think the most important thing is that somebody, that administrator on duty, have a tool for aggregating and sharing this information. And yes, some things are more complex than others, some are more costly than others, but there's no reason that any organization, I mean, if you had to, you could be doing it on a legal pad right now. So it's very important that you have a place where you are storing this information, and again, by individual, not by date. So very important. This is getting into a little bit of the detail of the type of incidents that occur, how we do that intake. So again, whether you're doing it manually with a piece of paper where you're checking something off, or whether this is built into a system, like for example what Firestorm has developed. We have, just so everybody knows, we have a system that's called BERTHA, which is Behavioral Risk and Threat Assessment, that has built into it all of the forms, the processes, the procedures, all of those things. And it's been implemented in corporations and schools all over the country. But those same things, you don't need BERTHA. You need something that allows you to do what BERTHA does. But again, depending on the type of organization, the size of organization, the complexity, that's going to tell you what it is you need. You need all of the pieces in Share the Formula, but none of them need to be purchased. You can do them all yourself, but they need to all be done. And again, if there's questions on any of the pieces, don't hesitate to reach out to us. The administrator on duty is part of a trained team. I think that's an important thing that you need to understand. It's not just someone, a clerical person, your receptionist who's sitting there and is just logging this stuff in. Now, that doesn't mean that that person is not an appropriate person to be on the team. They are probably a very appropriate person on the team, and you'll be amazed how much information that individual knows about everything that's going on within your school, your corporation, whatever it might be, because they hear and talk and see everything. So very often, those are good people to get involved in that process. And you want your behavioral assessment team to be multidisciplinary. You don't want them all to be board members or all to be C-suite members or all to be any one thing, because everyone brings a different perspective. We've unfortunately had the situation in schools where the behavioral assessment team was only made up of two people, and one was the school mental health professional, in this case it happened to be a psychologist, and the vice principal, who was their disciplinarian. And those two people together came to a conclusion that an individual was not likely to perpetrate a crime, and that individual did. And because their perspectives weren't broad enough, they missed something. So you want that team to be multidisciplinary. In those situations where you have a security professional in your corporation, or you have a potentially a school resource officer or something like that in the school, those people should absolutely be on your team, because not only do they see and hear things, but they see and hear things differently. So that's what you want. And there's a training program that exists for these people. It was created by the University of Alabama working with Firestorm on Bertha, and that is a online training program to train that team. And it's a great thing, and part of the program, again, those people need to understand and be trained in a peacetime environment, not when things, you can't train for this in the heat of the battle. So we need them trained and ready to go before they ever have to respond to an incident. Again, I talked to you before about the risk escalation matrix or the risk categorization matrix. It is absolutely essential, especially because depending on who's doing that job, they're not always going to have access to the team. They're not always going to have access to other people to help them. This is going to help them make the right decision quickly. And it's something that, again, is very specific to your organization, because each of you have different threats, different vulnerabilities that have to be addressed as part of that process. So one of the things that's universal about it is you're going to look at the different types of events that could occur, what you expect, and what the responses are going to be, and who's going to be notified, how, when, with what speed. All those different things have to be built into the plan. They have to be trained. You have to do test exercises. If you want this to work seamlessly when it's real, you've got to make it work seamlessly in advance. I've already talked to you quite a bit about the behavioral assessment team. Again, multidisciplinary, and they must be trained. They must be continuously updated and do exercises. Now, in some organizations, they're large enough that the exercises will take care of themselves, because you're actually going to be doing live exercises because you're going to be responding. It's, as I indicated before, every organization has a person sitting on the fence. Most organizations, especially if you're dealing with hundreds or thousands of students or employees, you've got, in many cases, hundreds of people sitting on the fence, because the number of people that are subject to drug and alcohol problems in their homes, spousal abuse, those type of things, is somewhere between 10 and 20% of your overall population. So it's really, again, you've got to approach this as though, yes, we know we have a problem, and we better figure out a way now that we're not going to be the next ones on the nightly news. So, having the pieces all in place. The last bubble you see on the screen, the one that says provide case management, that's one of the pieces that's going to be most difficult to build if you don't already have some kind of system in place, whether it's your EAP, whatever it might be. But even in those situations, comprehensively having the forms, the process, the procedures, knowing who to bring in, what professionals do we have available to us, having the different sign-offs and all those things, we can help you with all that. Ask us questions. If you're going to try to build that yourself, don't hesitate to give us a buzz and say, hey, we're thinking about this. What have you guys seen on that? Because we're more than happy to help, because our goal here is, if we can save one life, which we've already saved many lives, but if we could save one more, we've accomplished our goal. Would we like to have you all as clients? Absolutely. We understand that that's not possible. That doesn't mean we're not going to help you. So, again, don't hesitate to reach out. The management systems, Firestorm's Bertha system, if you guys want to see it, you want to understand it, you want to see whether it fits in your organization, let us know. We're happy to walk you through it and give you an explanation of it. We're at about 45 minutes, so I'm not going to go through the detail, but I'm more than happy to go through the detail. This is the way, what you see on your screen now is the way that the system works, and we can talk a lot more about that. And then again, as I mentioned, the violent response issue, because we're going to need to have the ability to respond, because sometimes something is going to slip through the net no matter how good of a job we do. So anytime you can help us to let your school district know your corporation know. Give everybody the Share the Formula website. Use the hashtag Share the Formula when you are talking to people online about these type of issues. Every one of you on this call that's a parent, if you don't print this document off of Share the Formula's website or off of Firestorm's website, Firestorm/Formula, and take it to your school board and say, what are we doing? If we're not doing this, tell me why what we're doing is better. Because if they can't explain to you how they're addressing every one of the issues that is on that document, you need to keep pushing them, because they've got a hole in the net. Something is not enough. So again, please follow us at Share the Formula, because we're continually adding information. And again, we set up a separate website for Share the Formula because we didn't want people to feel that they needed to interact with Firestorm specifically. So again, we want this information in as many hands as we can get it. So again, Karen, I'm going to open the floor back up to you. I don't know if there's any other, if there were any questions that were sent in, but certainly I'm available.
Thank you so much, Harry, and thank you, everyone, for assisting. Harry, could you just answer one question for me? Some
Sure.
folks feel that this is great for an enterprise-level organization, but for a smaller grassroots organization, they may find a challenge. We do know, I know I wrote a blog article today that said, we're asking for many people to be on a team, and technically, you may be all of those people on the team. So can you address how people might move forward if they're in a small organization, small office organization? I think the paper where there was a workplace shooting might be a good example of a smaller organization and how we can protect folks in that regard.
Well, sure. I mean, unfortunately, I've had the honor of working with lots of people that have been involved in very negative situations in their workplaces, workplace shootings and other types of violence. And they've ranged from, a beauty salon that had 7 employees all the way on up to, giant organizations with tens of thousands of people. And I don't think there's really a difference in terms of the approach. It's the same thing. Now, are you going to have a huge infrastructure that allows you to record information when you've got a 7-person beauty salon? No. Are you going to have a trained behavioral assessment team that's going to be able to intervene? Certainly not. But that's not really the issue. It's the concepts around that. You're still going to need to store your information somewhere. You're going to need to really know who your outside professionals are in that case, because probably what you're going to do when you have a concern or an issue, you're as the owner of that business or as the human resource professional, you're going to pick up the phone and you're going to call someone like Firestorm, because you're really not going to have at your disposal the things that you need in order to do this. But again, the thought process around it, the culture that you create is really important. Even if it's just within your own mind where I know how to deal with these things. Yeah, I see there's a problem there. That behavior is changing. I need to do something about it. And knowing that you've got the skills, the background, the people that you can call in to assist, that's going to, for the really small organization, that's what you're going to do. As the organizations start to get bigger in size, yeah, you're going to do a lot of these things. Like I said, your central repository, when you're a 20-person organization, it may be on paper. It may be it may be a Excel spreadsheet that somebody's keeping on their computer. As you get larger and you have more ability, more people, more money, you're going to do more complex things. But again, it's the philosophy, it's the thought process, it's the culture that you create around it, that culture of preparedness that's going to make the difference in keeping you and your people safe.
Harry, that was a great answer. Thank you. I think that is all. I'm sorry, sir?
I said my pleasure.
Yeah, well, always, Harry. Folks, I want to thank you very much for being a part of our session today. Harry, I really want to extend my great thanks to you If you've found value in this session today, which was really more for businesses, although we combined the message, we are having a similar session this afternoon at 2 o'clock. And while its focus is going to be more around schools, Harry, again, is going to speak to these concepts. So if there's someone in your organization you feel would find value in this session, 2 o'clock Eastern is the session. You can find that on the front page of our website under events, and we look forward to speaking to you then. You can also opt in to various news and article distribution. There's an opt-in area in the menu, top menu of the website at firestorm.com, and you can learn more by emailing firestorm.com. You can reach Harry directly at hrulin@firestorm.com. He is very open. And you can also visit us at sharetheformula.com to learn more about the components. Harry, thank you again. I look forward to joining you this afternoon at 2 p.m. And everyone, I'd like to wish you a great day. Thanks so much, and this will end today's session. Goodbye.
Thanks, Karen. Bye-bye.